So I'm going to go ahead and start making the succulent pot. First thing I'm going to do is take the orbit tool, the spindle looking thing at the top, zoom in to the man standing at the origin, click him once, and then press delete, giving myself a fresh new screen. I'm then going to go ahead and look at the top icon that's shaped like a square, a rectangle in fact. Select it, click the origin once, and move away from it. And we know that the succulent plant's dimension is 48 millimeters by 48. So I'm going to type in 48 on my keyboard, comma 48, and then enter. Notice how in the bottom right corner the dimensions also say 48, comma 48. I then zoom in with the scroll bar on my mouse and then orbit again. I need to have some drainage holes for my succulent plant. So I'm going to go up to where I initially selected the rectangle, but this time in the drop-down menu, I'm going to select the circle. Without any too much thought, since I'm not trying to create the most perfect succulent plant pot, I'm going to create 4 circles of a reasonable size. Drainage holes for my succulent plant, but well within the confines of the square. Also thinking about how this thing will be filled with dirt. I'm then going to go ahead and I'm going to take the offset tool. Now that is the top icon with the arrow pointing outwards. Select it, zoom in a little more, and constrain it to an edge. Click once and then move away. Let's have the walls of our succulent plant pot be about 5 millimeters. So I'm going to type in 5 as the dimension and notice how it moves out. I'm then going to go ahead and start thinking about the base of my succulent plant and how thick I want it to be. So I'm going to orbit to a horizontal perspective. Take the push-pull tool here up at the top. Highlight over the area where the dots are. Click once and then move upwards about 3 millimeters. So I type in 3 on my keyboard and then press return. Notice how the succulent plant pot is now taking form. I'm then going to go ahead and push-pull up the walls. First moving up to the layer of my base and then thinking about how high I actually want my pot to be. So I'm going to type in, as I extrude upwards, 48, enter, or return. And you'll notice that the walls of my succulent plant pot have moved upwards. Orbiting and looking under the succulent plant, you'll notice that there are these holes. And the holes are there because of the nature of the push-pull and they need to be repaired. So I'm going to take the line tool and drag across once and notice how Sketchup interprets that as now being a fully formed face and fills it. I'm going to orbit back to the top and then I'm going to look at this again. Press once, delete, press once, delete, press once, delete, select the face, delete, select the face, delete, delete, and then inspect the bottom again. Looking all good. At this point you'll notice that some features of my model are dark gray while others are light. External faces in Sketchup are indicated by the light gray color while internal ones are the dark gray. So at the bottom that is an external face that is facing outwards, and also on the interior of the circles that should be an external face. Because I've downloaded the Solid Inspector tool, I'm going to go to Tools, Solid Inspector Squared, select, and notice how Sketchup prompts me if I want to fix some errors, if you will. So I'm going to say fix, and then it says no errors, everything's shiny. That's pretty good. So I'm going to orbit around again and look at what I have. I see to myself this is a nice pot, but then I want to have a nice little curve. So first I'm going to look at it from this perspective, and I'm going to create a fillet around the edges. So I'm going to go to the drop-down menu, take the 2-point arc, select once within the confines of the wall, and I'll put down a marker line to talk about what that means. So I'm going to take the pencil tool, move up to the edge, and at the top as well. And I'm also going to create a marker edge just to understand where the wall begins from the frontmost face. I'll then take the 2-point arc tool again. And I'm going to work from within the line here to the left. In fact, giving myself some space. Click once and then move down my model. And then attempt to lay down an edge. Click once. Notice how when I've created this I can now select between the two parts. I'm then going to go ahead and I'm going to think about creating the fillet I talked about earlier. taking the eraser tool, deleting those lines that I used to maintain the edge and see it. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take the arrow tool. First I actually see I have a line that I don't need up there. Take the arrow tool, click once on an edge, hold down shift to do the multi-select around the whole perimeter of the top of the pot. Also making sure that I get that little edge there at the corner, right before the segment I highlighted earlier. I'm then going to go to Tools, Follow Me, and then Select, and notice how the Follow Me tool has now rounded the pot, which was one square. I'll do an edit undo extrude to see what it was, and then when I do the redo extrude, the follow me around the perimeter, notice how again it rounds. So at this point it's time to create the tray for this pot, but it's always good as I complete an object to do a solid inspector, see if it's solid, and it looks like everything's good. If not, redo some steps. I'm going to clean up the bottom of my model, taking the eraser tool, and I move over each line to make the bottommost face clean. I'm then going to go ahead and I'm going to take the arrow tool. I'm going to select that bottommost face, hold down Option to make a copy. I believe it's Control if you have a PC. And then I'm going to take the Move tool, click once, and then move away to create a copy of that bottommost face and move it well away. So for my tray for my succulent plant, I know that it has to fit within that spacing. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use this as a pattern just to understand how big the base of my tray needs to be. So I'm going to select it. I'm going to say select all connected, and hopefully can't make it a group. It doesn't matter, because what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make this a rectangle, because really that's all it is. We just need to make sure that we have some kind of square, some kind of representation that we can use to create the bottommost part of our tray. But it is important though that I have a midpoint, so I will create one line across it to establish that as I drag out the circle tool. Once this circle is placed, I can take the eraser tool and I can delete away the lines of that square that I used just to know how big of a base I need for my tray. I'll then orbit to this position. I'll go ahead and I'll extrude this up 3 millimeters, typing 3 on my keyboard, and then return. From here I'm thinking, alright, it's much better if this is a rounded edge at the top, because right now this isn't a tray at all. And in fact, I actually should probably increase the diameter of this tray slightly for this curve. So what I'll do is I'll take the offset again and I'll take the most bottom edge, drag out, and then I'll extrude up again and move even so I match the plane. Now from this perspective I'm going to take the line tool, the pencil tool, move to an endpoint. Move upwards along the blue axes, select once, and then click down and across so I create this sailboat-like shape. What I'll then do is I'll round out that edge because I don't want a jagged side of my tray. So I'll take the 2-point arc tool, select once on the side, and then move upwards and lay down a curve. Sketchup's told me that the number of segments is too large for that angle, for that radius. My shape is really too small. So what I'll do is I'll attempt to make a more defined, bigger curve, zooming in slightly. I can clean up my model. At this point it has broken out on the left side of the rectangle I drew earlier. But because I understand the follow me tool and how this two-dimensional shape will follow this perimeter, the path if you will, and create a form in its place, the edge of my tray. So I'm going to select the perimeter of the circle, taking the select tool, clicking it so it turns blue. I'm then going to go to Tools, I'm going to go to Follow Me, and then I'm going to select that two-dimensional plane created earlier. Notice how my tray is now rounded. It's always good to do a solid inspection. In fact, it's necessary for when you're 3D printing. I have the holes on my tray, it's rounded. I also have a pot which is rounded and it has great holes for drainage. I'm going to go to Tools, Solid Inspector. There are a few things that need to be fixed. Afterwards, everything's shiny and everything's ready to 3D print. And that's how you create a succulent pot and tray.